319 for them.
I'm Sherry Husa. I am the President and CEO of Managed Health Services. We are a health insurance company located in Milwaukee, and I am also the President of Competitive Wisconsin. So it's my pleasure to welcome you to our first Pints and Policy session of 2016. We hold these smaller informal sessions a couple times a year so that our members and their guests can meet and dialogue with the people who shape and make policy in the state of Wisconsin. So today our guest is Assembly Speaker Robin Vos, and clearly you need no introduction, but I must say that you're one of the most prominent and visible policymakers, and I'm just very delighted you're joining us this evening. As most of you know, Competitive Wisconsin's primary objective is to shape and improve Wisconsin's ability to compete for the jobs and businesses, the ideas and capital that we all need to prosper. And so I know you are all familiar with Speaker Vos's distinguished and productive legislative career and his credentials, but what you might not know is that he has an equally prestigious resume as a small business owner and operator. Speaker Vos truly understands what it takes for Wisconsin to be competitive, and he acts as a policy leader to affect change. We at Competitive Wisconsin know this because he was an early supporter of our first Be Bold effort, which was a call for more robust and coordinated approaches for the state's economic development efforts. And Speaker Vos also supported Be Bold 2's ideas for a more focused and effective collaboration on talent and workforce development. So we look forward to sharing our Be Bold work with Speaker Vos in the months ahead. However, tonight we just very much look forward to hearing from you, Speaker Robin Vos. Welcome to Competitive Wisconsin.
I appreciate that. So thank you everybody for being here today. I want to begin by thanking each of you for being part of an effort that makes us all proud, right? Competitive Wisconsin is part of the reason that we were able to do so many good things starting in 2011 all the way through today. It's because people are visionary and they try to look for positives and see where Wisconsin can continue to improve. I will say that I think that's the job of our caucus by and large. We have 63 folks, as you know, from almost every possible background, each working in their own way to try to make Wisconsin more competitive and to be able to help job creators basically create the environment that we know it takes to succeed. When I look around the room, I think about all of the issues over the course of the past year that we have worked on that benefit most of the industries that you were involved in. More important to me than anything, though, is the partnerships that Competitive Wisconsin has brought people together who you might not traditionally think would be normal allies. Local government and different business interests. You're supposed to be opposed to each other. I think that the exact idea of bringing folks to the table is what we want more of to make sure that Wisconsin can be competitive and can do things that really make us all proud. So one of the most favorite parts of my job is the ability to travel around the country. I'm on the NCSL, which is our Conference of State Legislatures Board of Directors, and I'm also on the Board of Directors of something else called the State Legislative Leaders Foundation. So I get the chance to sit down with legislative leaders from all across the country, and all the partisan labels are left behind. So Republicans and Democrats, we've gotten to all know each other really well. And the interesting thing is we are all basically fighting for the same thing, even though we might go at it in a different way. But we all want to have rising wages. We all want to have a competitive economic environment. We all want folks to be able to live on their own and support their own lifestyle. Now, I prefer to do that through more of an entrepreneurial approach. Other people prefer to make investments in public programs to help folks. Both laudable. But I think Wisconsin has to decide, as we move forward, how are we going to make ourselves more competitive with the rest of the country? When I talk to my friends who represent southern states or those who are more red, of course they are focusing on the private sector almost exclusively, right? They are focusing on changing their tax rates, making sure their regulatory climate is friendly, ensuring that we have competitive prices for energy and all of the things that go into a competitive business climate. My friends on the Democrat side, they are choosing to make investments in public programs, making sure that they have Obamacare fully funded, making sure that they have job training in universities and schools, all of which are also laudable. Probably in Wisconsin, we've done a little bit of both, and I think that at some points we need to figure out what is the right long-term strategy for the next decade. So If I think about what we've done over the course of the past 5 years, I think we've done a really good job of trying to rein in regulations, make sure our taxes are flat, and that our economic environment is competitive. But I think now we need to be a little bit smarter. So we are going to do something that we have never done before, where we are authorizing a policy retreat, where legislators are going to get together in March outside the Capitol to talk about all of the issues that we want to do next session. It's not about politics, it's about what direction do we want to go in. So as I know that Competitive Wisconsin is also looking at B-Bowl 2, I am excited to hear your ideas. Because frankly, while there are a lot of bills that probably won't get passed this session, which would help on economic development, we need to figure out a new strategy for the next 20 years and just start asking ourselves some basic questions. Is the way that we have conducted K-12 education something that we are going to be able to sustain for the next 20 or 30 years, or should we look at making changes now to have us become a leader? Job training, higher education, is the way that it was created 20 or 30 years ago the ability to keep it like it is, or should we look at, say, what's it going to be like 20 or 30 years from now? And with the pace of change, I don't know about you, but probably 3 years ago, I didn't even know what Uber was. And now we're talking about having it literally transform the way that we have transportation policy set in our entire country. The same with job training. How many of us really thought that online education was going to be anywhere near what it is today 10 years ago? So for the most part, state government hasn't been real good at adapting to change, and that's one of the things that we need to focus on to try to be ahead of the curve, or at least to follow it, as opposed to being some of those who are the last people at the table to actually get it to the goal to try to make sure that we're all in the right place. So I want to thank you. I think that we had a great session. I'm really proud of what we did. But frankly, the future is what I'm more excited about. Not just the elections, I mean, that part's the thing we have to go through. But to make sure that we have the time to figure out what our policies are. We work with Governor Walker and with Competitive Wisconsin and groups like yours to figure out what are the strategies we can actually make happen, and then focus next session on making sure we have a long checklist of things that we can accomplish that all of you will be able to invest in and make sure that they're what you need for your industries and for our state. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. Yes?
People attraction. One of the things that my members, the cities and villages, are already seeing, and businesses seeing the same thing, there's just aren't enough bodies here. And the demographic trends are working against Wisconsin. As you look at policies for the next 20 years, what are some thoughts that go through your mind about how we can attract people?
So it's interesting, as Sherry said, so I am very fortunate that I have fantastic people who work at my company. So when I got elected to the legislature, we had about 10 employees, and that was in 2004, and basically I have not been there, and we're at almost 35. So for me, I'm kind of that normal story. I don't know if it's not supposed to be that I'm not there and we grow. I saw that, Jerry, but that's pretty much how it worked out. Yes. But our biggest problem, and I literally just sat down on Monday with our team, and I am basically doing across the board 10 to 20% raises for all of my staff. Because most of our people are in that $10 to $12 an hour range. I cannot keep good qualified people for that wage, even though they've been with me for a long time. In my hometown, Aldi's, for a cashier, is hiring at $11 an hour. Now, sitting behind a cash register waiting for somebody to swipe their credit card, or working in a manufacturing plant for 12 bucks an hour, probably is going to be a problem in the long run for all of the industries that we are in. So I worry about that a lot. One of the things that I give credit to Alberta Darling, she came to me about having us pass a resolution to allow for a sliding scale of benefits so that we don't have people where, basically when they earn too much money, they lose all of the benefits. We have to figure out some way to push people into the private sector. That's not happening as much, so I'm excited about that as a possibility. But frankly, there's two real problems, right? We're not having enough kids. That is a big problem. If you look at almost every single school district in the state, they are in declining enrollment, which is a big problem just for financing education, making sure we have enough workers that are competitive. And you all know it, but I'll just repeat it because it never changes. We have far too many people who are choosing the wrong kind of higher education, not for themselves, but for the jobs that we need. When literally almost half of the people who graduate from a four-year institution don't use their degree in the first job they get, that's a problem. We have to figure out how do we reassign people to feel value no matter what their degree is. That's a big problem because almost every group I speak to, I say, how many of you think we need more plumbers and electricians? And all the hands go up. And then I say, so how many of you encourage your kids to be an electrician or a plumber? And they all laugh. You know, and that's the problem that we're in. It is the biggest problem because nobody wants to do that. So I will also say that, you know, for all of the faults that Dane County has or that the city of Milwaukee has, and they have plenty, those are the things that young people want to focus on. I was surprised. I spoke last night to a group of the Racine, Kenosha Young Republicans, and they're all people who are 30 and under. And I was surprised. They said that their goals were not owning a house. And these are Republicans, remember. These are young Republicans. Their goals were not owning a house. I know, I'm sorry, Tom. I know. Their goals were not owning a house. And they said one of their most important issues was knowing what was in their food. And I kind of went, wow, am I at the right place? But it's just a different way of looking at the world, right? I mean, I don't really think what's in my McDonald's quarter pounder. I just eat it. But young people, there's a lot of different issues. So part of it is Wisconsin has to adapt and make ourselves into an attractive place so that everybody wants to live in not just a big town like a Madison or Milwaukee, but what does Racine do? What does Stevens Point do? What does every community around the state do? And frankly, I don't know the answer to that question, and that's part of what we have to explore. And I'd be curious to know what it takes to get people to want to live in all parts of the state, not just as a pit stop. Because I will never forget that I was in Chicago, and I happened to be at a place where they were doing a recruiting fair for a bunch of college students at University of Chicago, and I heard somebody walk by me, and they said, after having stopped at the S.C. Johnson table, these two people said to each other, who the hell would want to live in Racine, Wisconsin? You know, and I just happened to be standing there, and I'm like, that is what a lot of young people are looking at. And we've got to figure out a way to make that place just as attractive as downtown San Francisco, and it's not going to be easy. Yes?
Let's take Paul Fiscal Road, about 20, 25 miles from here. We ran into a problem here over the last couple of years in the dairy industry. We have a veterinary hospital that's expanding on the dairy side. And through the city, we're doing some assistance. But we went through, we had Senator Olson, Representative Ripwood, and I'm trying to find something. In manufacturing, you can find state assistance everywhere. Mm-hmm. We could find nothing to assist in the expansion of that hospital that provides veterinarians for 6, 7 counties worth of dairy farms. Mm-hmm. And if we're going to retain the dairy industry, for instance, it's not just the industry, it's those support industries that make it possible.
Mm-hmm. Paul, that is an excellent point. And you know, it's not just veterinarians where we have a serious shortage. I'm sure most of you probably already know this. There are 16 counties in the state of Wisconsin that don't have a single psychiatrist to deliver mental health services. So the problem is, a lot of folks, well, first of all, whatever your partisan leanings, you know, the entire push with Obamacare to get more people to have primary care, that's a good thing. But to get more people into primary care positions as doctors means that there are incentives to not have you become more of a specialist, which requires more training and not necessarily a lot more money in pay. So we've got to fix that. One of the things that we did, we had, of course, 6 different mental health bills that went through this session. The 7th, if you ask Paul Tittle, he still is angry at me because I didn't pass his number 7. But his number 7 bill would actually take the first $200,000 of income for the first 10 years you practice and make it tax-free, which would be about $12,000 a year. So we're looking at some incentives, but I'm trying, and I said to Paul, is that going to make somebody want to be a psychiatrist who wasn't before? Maybe, maybe. Is it internships? Is it residencies? Is it no debt if you go into certain counties? So I am open to all those ideas for hard to fill positions, because you're right, if you don't have a veterinarian, you certainly can't have a thriving agriculture practice. But granted, if you don't have a psychiatrist to help somebody who has mental health issues, you have a lot more costs over time with everything from jail and, you know, having their kids be productive and everything else. So, yes?
Speaker, I'm intrigued as you travel around the state, and I applaud the idea of a policy retreat. How receptive to change do you believe your caucus is? Do you believe the people as you travel around the state of Wisconsin are?
Well, depends on how you define change. There are a lot of people in my caucus who would like to make a whole hell of a lot of changes that a whole hell of a lot of people won't like. So that I can understand. So here's what I would say, and I really mean this, that We have gotten so good in the state of Wisconsin as a legislature and even as a conservative movement. We are so good at execution that we have forgotten about the art of persuasion. That you are supposed to take your idea and go out and tell people why it's making their life better and how it's going to improve their family. And we focus a lot of our time on let's hurry and get it done. And frankly, we had some issues where, I won't even say anybody in this room, but we got things done that were lifetime priorities, right? We had not even had the governor sign it, never heard a thank you, and people are already on to, well, how come we didn't do this other thing? As opposed to, some of these things are monumentally huge for what we would want. You know, statewide school choice, whatever your opinion is, I think that's a really big deal. You know, right to work, changes to prevailing wage, making all the changes in the budget, funding, you know, a lot of mental health programs. These are all really good things. But no offense, we didn't hear a lot of people saying, well, isn't that nice? They focused on, why didn't you do this other thing for me? So part of it is we have to sit back, and that's part of what our policy retreat's going to look at, is how do we make sure that we engage all the stakeholders, the public, and do a better job of building support for our ideas, as opposed to just convincing 50 people in a room and 17 in another room that is the right answer. So I think most of the changes, I mean, the hard thing that I have realized, and especially if you look at the presidential race, that the Democrats have an easier job, right? They, and in the minority, they get to complain about everything in Wisconsin, I get that. But even at the national level, they get to be the people who hand out candy at Halloween, right? They get every single person, how much do you want? Take a handful, happy to give it to you. And we get to be the people at the dentist, where we have to say, geez, you've eaten too much of that, you can't afford it, you shouldn't do that. Well, it's a lot easier to give away than it is to take back. So part of it is we have to do a better job explaining why you can't have, you know, over too many regulations because it drives out job creators. You can't have a $15 minimum wage because McDonald's ends up putting computers in everywhere and you lose the jobs at whatever wage they are. So our job is just harder, but I think it's more important, which is what we're going to focus on. Yeah.
So 2011, you're the finance chair. 13 forward, you're the speaker of the assembly. Over the course of Wisconsin's history, there's very little turnover in the legislature until 2010. And now we've seen sort of an exponential turnover almost every cycle. From a business standpoint, for these guys in the audience, is that a good thing or a bad thing or too soon to tell?
Well, we always have the Senate, which is a good thing or a bad thing. So they don't have the turnover. You know, most of the people who are in the Senate were elected before I was, and I'm the third most senior person. So that kind of tells you the other side of the equation. I will say that I am always excited at the people who I get to serve with because most of them do not look at this as a career. They want to make a big impact, do something that actually can be remembered by history and move on back to their job, right? That's why, I mean, I'll tell you, one of my biggest losses was when Dean Knudsen came to me and said, you know, I'm retiring. Now, you might not agree with Dean on every single policy item, but he's super bright. He's very passionate. He's not planning to run for some other office, so he wasn't a climber where, you know, what can I do to put on my resume? And he just wanted to get stuff done. And he said, Robin, give me a checklist of all the things that you think we're going to do that we haven't done in these first 6 years and maybe I'll stay. Well, it's kind of what started my brain to say I could make a checklist, but most of the important things are done as far as a conservative, so we need to create a new set of important things. So that's the frustrating part for me, is that a lot of these folks are kind of getting at the backside of their career because they're not looking for something else. And we just have to make sure that we remind people why it's so important to be here and why